Keanu Reeves was sitting in his home office, a small cozy room with an old chair. The computer screen was glowing in the dark. He had just read an email. It made him really sad and also angry. The email said, "I don't know if anyone cares, but people like me are not treated nicely at the 7th Street Café. If you have darker skin or if you talk with an accent, they give you the worst jobs. We feel invisible." Keanu read it slowly. He felt a storm growing inside him. This was not how things were supposed to be. He had helped build the lighthouse cafes to be kind places. Places where every worker felt safe and welcome. He didn't want just pretty posters or fake smiles. He wanted real kindness. But now this? His assistant had sent the email to him right away. The PR team, people who protect a company's image, told him, "Let's just send a nice memo. Maybe check the place quietly." Keanu shook his head. No, that wouldn't help. He couldn't just sit behind a desk. He had to see it with his own eyes. He got an idea. A smart, brave idea. He would go to the cafe himself. No cameras. No fancy clothes. No one would know he was a movie star. He would pretend to be just a new worker. Just another helper behind the counter. He stood up and looked in the mirror. His beard had grown a little. Good. He pulled on a plain blue hoodie, old jeans, and a baseball cap. He typed a message on his phone. "Need extra hands at 7th Street. I'll send someone." The boss of that area quickly replied, "We're short-staffed. Send whoever you can." Keanu smiled a little. Whoever, huh? Tomorrow, he would walk through the cafe doors as KC, just a helper. Not Keanu Reeves. Not the boss. Not a star. Just another guy. He closed his laptop. The room was quiet, but inside, his heart was loud. He was ready. The bell above the cafe door jingled as KC, Keanu in disguise, walked in. The cafe smelled like burnt coffee. But something else was in the air too. Something not good. Like tension. He walked to the counter. Nobody noticed him. Perfect. Behind the bar, workers were moving fast. Lights buzzed overhead. Coffee machines hissed like snakes. The line of customers was long and cranky. Then he saw her. A young woman named Lila was working like a superhero. She was very pregnant, but still fast and careful. Her sleeves were rolled up. Her forehead was sweaty. She took orders, made drinks, cleaned the counter, all at once. She was doing her best. Before Keanu could talk to her, a man's voice shouted, "You the new guy?" A tall man with shiny blonde hair and a mean face pointed at him. His name was Darren, and Keanu had seen his name before in the HR reports. But Darren didn't know who Keanu really was. "Name?" Darren asked, not smiling. "KC," Keanu said in a low voice. Darren shoved an apron into his chest. "Clock in. Stay out of the way. Don't mess up. No hello. No welcome. Just orders." Keanu put on the apron and walked behind the counter. Lila saw him and gave a small, tired smile. "First day?" she asked while stacking cups. "Yeah," Keanu said. "Any advice?" She glanced at Darren, who was yelling again. "Don't ask for help. Don't ask for a break. Just try to survive," she said. There was no anger in her voice. Just tiredness. Keanu's heart sank. He watched her get treated badly by some customers. Some were rude. Some looked at her like she didn't belong. And Darren? He just stood there. Always shouting. Never helping. An old lady dropped some coins while paying. Lila gently helped her. "Take your time, ma'am," she said kindly. Darren was angry. "We don't have time for charity cases," he yelled. Tell her to use a card or move on. But Lila stayed calm. It's already paid, she said softly and gave the coffee to the lady. Darren growled but didn't say more. There were customers watching. Keanu felt his hands shake with anger. This wasn't just a bad day. This was every day. It was wrong. He tucked the moment into his memory. Tomorrow, he'll be ready. Today he had to watch, learn, and wait. The next morning, Keanu came in even earlier. The sky was still dark. Lila was already there, working quietly. There was no music, just the sounds of her moving slowly, clearly very tired. Keanu put on his apron. Lila nodded to him with sleepy eyes. She looked like she hadn't slept at all. Other workers arrived, yawning and grumbling. Darren marched out of the back office with his usual loud voice. Morning, slackers. KC, you're on trash and floors after the rush. No breaks till it's done. Keanu nodded, hiding his anger. Then the rush began. Customers filled the shop. Keanu worked the register. Lila made drinks. She looked slower than yesterday. Her hands were shaking. She leaned on the counter when no one was looking. She touched her back and winced. She was clearly in pain. Keanu tried to help her, but Darren was always watching. Always waiting to shout. Then a man in a suit yelled, "I ordered 15 minutes ago. Where's my drink?" Lila rushed to hand it to him. "Sorry for the wait, sir," she said. He grabbed it rudely and mumbled something mean. Keanu heard it. Lila did too. Darren didn't care. He turned to Lila and said, "Maybe if you weren't so slow, customers wouldn't be mad." Lila didn't say anything. She just kept working. Keanu's hands were in fists now. This wasn't just mean. This was bullying. He looked at Lila's reflection in the silver coffee machine. Her eyes were empty. Her body was swaying. She looked like she might fall down any second. If Keanu didn't do something soon, she'd break. He breathed in deep. Not yet, he told himself. But soon. Lunchtime was even worse. People filled the cafe. Orders piled up. Lila moved like a tired robot. Keanu worked fast, doing his best. Then it happened. A small old woman came to the counter. She held a little cloth purse close to her chest. "Small coffee, please," she whispered. Her voice had an accent. Lila smiled and rang it up. The woman slowly counted coins. Nickels, dimes, pennies. People in line behind her sighed loudly. Keanu stepped forward to help, but Darren rushed in. "We don't have time for this charity work," he shouted. "Tell her to use a card or leave." The old woman looked scared and confused. Her hands shook. Lila said calmly, "She's almost done. It's fine." Darren leaned closer. His voice was louder now. "This is America. We're not a soup kitchen for immigrants who can't pay right." The whole cafe went quiet. People looked uncomfortable. Some looked down. Some looked away. Keanu felt like he had been punched in the chest. He looked at the woman, who still held her coins. He looked at Lila, whose eyes were shiny with tears but strong. Lila didn't back down. She finished the sale and handed the woman her coffee. "Thank you, ma'am," she said softly. The old woman nodded and slowly walked away. Then Darren whispered, just to Lila and Keanu, "That's strike one, Oaks. You want to keep your hours? Learn who matters." Lila didn't answer. She didn't even blink. Keanu's fists cracked behind the counter. His hands hurt from how hard he was squeezing. Not yet. But soon. He wasn't just going to fire Darren. He was going to show everyone the truth. And when he did, it would be loud. Lila turned back to the big coffee machines. She didn't say anything. The line of customers moved slowly forward. Keanu was watching everything. And for the first time in a very long time, he felt something strong, something called rage. But it wasn't the kind of anger that feels hot and loud. No, this was the kind that felt cold and deep, like ice in his chest. This wasn't just about a mean boss anymore. This was something worse. This was being cruel on purpose. This was hurting people again and again. And Keanu knew it was going to stop. Very soon. The afternoon was very hot. The cafe was full of heat, and it felt like the warm air was sitting on everyone's shoulders. It smelled like old burnt coffee and people who were very tired. Keanu wiped down the counters with a cloth. He kept looking over at Lila, and also at Darren, their boss, who was walking around like he owned everything, like a guard in a jail. Lila was moving slower now. Keanu could tell something was wrong. Her hands, which used to be fast and careful, were now shaky. She messed up putting on lids and sleeves. Twice, she had to blink her eyes really hard, like she was trying to stay awake. Darren noticed too, but he didn't look worried. He just looked mad. "Move faster, Oaks," he shouted. "You're slowing everyone down." Lila whispered, "Sorry," and tried to move quicker. She went from one machine to the next, but her body didn't want to listen. She moved like a tired robot. Keanu's stomach felt tight. He knew what was happening. He saw the red in Lila's face. He saw her fingers shaking. She was breathing fast. She needed to sit down. She needed water. She needed someone to care. But Darren didn't care. He just leaned against the wall, arms crossed, shouting orders. He didn't help. He didn't even try. The line of customers grew longer. Some people were tapping their feet. Others looked bored and annoyed. And then, something terrible happened. Lila took a step, but she staggered. She reached for the counter to keep from falling, but she missed it. Everything seemed to slow down. Her knees gave out. The tray of drinks she was carrying slipped from her hands. It hit the floor and made a loud crashing noise. Cups broke open. Hot drinks spilled everywhere. Lila fell down too, right beside the mess. The cafe got quiet. Super quiet. For one moment, nobody moved. Keanu dropped the cloth in his hand and ran to her side. "Lila," he said, kneeling beside her. "Can you hear me?" Lila looked up at him. Her eyes were open, but she looked confused. She tried to sit up. "I'm fine," she whispered, even though her body wasn't fine at all. Before Keanu could help her stand, Darren stomped over. His face was red with anger. "What is this?" Darren yelled, waving his arms. "Are you trying to embarrass us?" Keanu stood up and faced Darren. His voice was calm, but very cold. "She's tired," Keanu said. "She needs water. She needs to rest." Darren made a mean face. "She needs to toughen up. If she can't handle a shift, maybe she doesn't belong here." Some customers gasped. A few people took out their phones and started recording. Darren didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he just didn't care. He pointed at Lila and shouted, "Get up! Clean that up! Or clock out and don't come back!" Keanu stepped in front of Lila, blocking Darren. Lila was trying to clean the mess. Her hands were shaking. She was still on her knees on the cold floor. Keanu's hands turned into fists. He was so mad his nails dug into his skin. This wasn't just about a bad boss anymore. This was something worse. This was about shaming someone in front of everyone. And Darren acted like he could do whatever he wanted. Like no one would ever stop him. Keanu's voice shook a little, but it was strong. "You're going to regret that," he said. Darren laughed like it was a joke. You don't make the rules here, new guy. Keanu gave a small smile. No, he said. But I'm about to. Something inside Keanu had changed. A fire was lit. Darren didn't even know what was coming. Lila didn't leave. She stayed there on the floor, cleaning up the spilled coffee. Her hands still shook. Her knees still touched the cold tiles. People were watching. Some were filming. Others just looked away, pretending they didn't see. Darren stood over her like a bully. His arms were crossed. His eyes were mean and full of joy, like he liked watching her suffer. Move faster, he snapped. Maybe if you people knew how to work, you wouldn't always be at the bottom. The whole cafe went silent again. You people. That was it. That was the worst thing he could have said. He had shown his true self. Keanu stepped forward, ready to speak. But Lila was faster. She stood up slowly. Her face was pale, but she was standing tall. I'm fine, she said softly. I'll finish the shift. Keanu saw it. He saw how hard it was for her to say those words. He saw her standing against all the shame and pain. Darren smiled like he had won. He turned to the crowd like he wanted them to clap for him. And then, he did something even worse. He looked at Keanu with hate in his voice. You want to be a hero, new guy? Fine. You and her can close tonight. See how you like cleaning up after people who can't even pay properly. Then he grabbed a big, smelly trash bag. It was full of old drinks, napkins, and leftover food. He dumped it right at Lila's feet. Some of it splashed on her shoes. It smelled terrible. People in the cafe started murmuring. Keanu could feel his heart pounding. Everything around him faded into a tunnel. His whole body told him to move, to act. But he had kept it in, until now. Lila froze. Her eyes were wide. Her hands trembled. Slowly, she knelt again to pick up the trash. Keanu stepped forward. Enough, he said. Darren laughed quietly. Pathetic. That was it. The last straw. Keanu took off his apron. He tossed it onto the counter. Then he pulled off his old cap. His long dark hair fell out. He pulled off his fake glasses too. Darren stared at him, confused. People in the cafe started whispering. That's Keanu Reeves, someone said. More people raised their phones. Darren's face turned white. Lila stared at Keanu like she had never seen him before. Keanu stood tall. He looked at Darren with eyes that were calm and strong. You have 5 seconds, Keanu said, loud and clear, to get away from my counter before I throw you out the front door. Darren opened his mouth to say something. Then another person said louder, That's really Keanu Reeves. The crowd buzzed. People started to realize who he was. Keanu took one step forward. Darren stepped back, almost tripping. His clipboard fell to the floor. Everyone was quiet. It felt like time had stopped. Keanu was no longer pretending. No more hiding. He stood there, tall and proud, and everyone knew him now. You can't do this, Darren said. Keanu's voice was calm. I can. And I will. He walked out from behind the counter. He didn't rush. He didn't shout. But everyone moved out of his way. Darren backed toward the door. His eyes were looking everywhere, trying to find someone to save him. But no one came. There was just Keanu. For months, Keanu said, his voice so steady it felt like the walls were shaking. You've been mean. You've been hurting the people who work for you. He pointed at Lila. She was still near the trash, standing quietly. You picked on the ones who were too tired or too scared to fight back, Keanu said. You treated people badly just because you could. And you let your hate grow until it became the way you ran this place. Darren tried to speak, but no words came out. He just opened and closed his mouth like a fish out of water. The crowd was quiet. Everyone was watching. And for the first time, Darren looked scared. Keanu didn't let Darren speak. Right away, he said, "You're fired. Your job at the Lighthouse Café is over. You are no longer welcome here, or anywhere under my name." A gasp went through the cafe. Some people clapped, while others whispered angrily into their phones. Darren's face changed from fear to anger. "This is illegal," he shouted. "You can't just fire me like this. I have rights." Keanu raised an eyebrow and said calmly, "You'll find the HR handbook by the door on your way out. Look at page 17, section 5. It says gross misconduct means you can be fired immediately." Darren looked around, but no one, not the customers or staff, showed any sympathy. Everyone was just watching him, judging him, and some were even taking videos. Darren's shoulders dropped, and slowly, he grabbed his clipboard and walked toward the door. He stopped, holding the door handle, and looked back at Keanu, his face twisted in anger. Keanu met his gaze without blinking. "Apologize," he said quietly. Darren hesitated. Then, seeing that no one would help him, he mumbled a half-hearted apology. "Sorry," he said, but it wasn't sincere. He didn't even look at Lila when he said it. Keanu didn't respond, and Darren stormed out of the cafe. The room felt like it could breathe again. Keanu turned back to the counter and looked at the customers. They were all stunned. Then he looked at Lila. She was standing there, her eyes wide, with tears that hadn't fallen yet. Keanu stepped closer to her. "You never deserved any of that," he said gently. Lila put a hand over her mouth, nodding, her body shaking. Keanu wasn't finished. "Starting today, everything changes." The customers started clapping, cheering, and holding up their phones to take pictures. Lila smiled through her tears. It was a small smile, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, hope came back to the Lighthouse Café. As the crowd slowly left, leaving excitement behind, Keanu stayed by the counter. His sleeves were rolled up, and his apron was off. His heart was still pounding, but he knew that fixing the cafe wouldn't just take firing one bully. It would take more. Lila stood quietly beside him, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked smaller without the weight of surviving under Darren's cruelty, but she was also stronger in a way. Keanu turned to her and said, "Take a break. You've done enough for one lifetime." Lila hesitated, like she couldn't believe she was being offered rest without any conditions. "Are you sure?" she whispered. Keanu smiled. "I insist." Lila walked over to a booth by the window and sat down with a long sigh, her whole body shaking. Just then, Clara, the district supervisor, walked in. She had a clipboard in her hands and sharp, watching eyes. She looked around at the mess, the quiet workers, and the heavy air, and then her eyes landed on Keanu. She nodded once. "I heard," she said simply. "Everything." Keanu didn't waste any time. "We need a full reset. A new interim manager, new hiring rules, new schedules." Clara was already writing notes, making calls. "Isla can step in temporarily," she said. "She's good and knows how to run things fairly." Keanu nodded. "Good. I want payroll checked, too. If anyone has been paid less than they should, they get every penny back, plus interest." Clara glanced over at Lila, sitting quietly by the window. "She's been holding this place together, hasn't she?" she asked. Keanu's jaw tightened. "More than anyone knows." Clara didn't ask for more details. She just kept writing. Keanu turned back to the counter. The coffee was spilled, Cups were broken and trash was everywhere, but it already felt lighter. He grabbed a towel and started cleaning, not because he had to, but because real leaders do the small things, too. About an hour later, Isla arrived. She was a strong woman with her hair in a bun and a warm smile that made the baristas feel better. She quickly took charge, giving clear instructions and checking in with every staff member. Keanu watched, feeling relieved. Things were changing. Real change was happening. He looked over at Lila. She was watching, too. Not working, just breathing. Finally, Keanu walked over to her, a folder under his arm. He placed the folder gently in front of her. Lila blinked, unsure. "What is this?" she asked. "A fresh start," Keanu said. "Inside is your back pay, a raise starting next week, and a formal offer to stay with better leadership." Lila's hands shook as she opened the folder. When she looked up, her eyes were shining. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. Keanu gave a small smile. "You don't have to say anything. Just know that you were never invisible here, and starting today, no one ever will be." Lila stared at him for a long moment before smiling wide. It was a real smile. And for the first time, Keanu felt like he hadn't just saved a cafe. He had saved something bigger, something worth fighting for. 2 days later, Keanu stood in the doorway of the Lighthouse Café. The place looked new, brighter and livelier. Lila was behind the counter, training 2 new workers with a confidence she had never had before. Isla was sitting at a side table, reviewing schedules. The customers were coming in slowly, but they were greeted with real kindness, not fake smiles. Keanu took a deep breath. It hadn't taken a miracle to make this happen. It had taken action, listening, and not ignoring the problems. Clara had found problems in other stores, too. Things like workers being paid less than they should, working too many hours, and unfair treatment. Because of Keanu's visit, the whole company was going to change. New hiring rules, training to stop bias, and complaint lines with real accountability. The Lighthouse Café wasn't just going to survive, it was going to be what it was meant to be, a place of light and hope. Keanu stepped forward and caught Lila's eye. She smiled at him, this time without fear. He walked to the counter and said, "Ready for your next big challenge?" Lila looked confused. "Challenge?" Keanu slid a shiny new name tag across the counter. It said, "Assistant Manager Lila Harper." Lila gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The cafe erupted in applause. Staff, customers, even Isla clapped proudly. Tears filled Lila's eyes, but she laughed, too, a bright, happy laugh. "I don't know if I'm ready," she said, still laughing through her tears. Keanu smiled warmly. "You've been ready for a long time. You just needed someone to see it." She held on to the name tag tightly, like it was a sign of her new beginning. Keanu stayed for a while longer, helping stock napkins, greeting customers, and sharing quiet smiles with the staff. But eventually, he slipped out of the cafe, quietly, like he had come in. No big announcements, no standing in the spotlight. Because real leadership isn't about being in the center. It's about building a place where others can grow. Sometimes, injustice hides in plain sight. People get used to it, and it's excused. But change doesn't always happen with big speeches. It starts when one person decides to stand up and say enough. Leadership isn't about power. It's about responsibility. It's about seeing the invisible, hearing the unheard, and helping those who are often left behind. If you liked this story, tell me in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more fun adventures and mysteries. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.